Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting of Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough's Council's Planning Committee. Quite a long agenda this evening. I'm going to take it as printed. And let's start with agenda item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence this evening? I know of none myself. I don't know if any other member has had any communications. In that case, let's take it that we have no apologies this evening and move on to our second agenda item, which is declarations of interest. Are there any such declarations members feel they ought to make this evening? And once again, I will take silence as a sign that there are such declarations. And we'll progress to item 3 of our agenda, which is minutes of the previous meeting, which have been printed and circulated. Are members content that they are a correct record of our previous proceedings?
Happy to propose that they are.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any dissenting voices, or are we content with the minutes? Again, I will take silence as a mark of assent, so those minutes have therefore been passed, and we can progress to our first substantive item this evening, which is application for major development, 2 to 4 Marsh Parade, Newcastle. There is a supplementary, I believe, which our members should have had sight of, and I look to our officer to see if there's any further comments before we proceed to a debate.
No, Chair, there's nothing further to report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I open the item for comment. And maybe I could start, because I know we've explored this a little bit prior to the meeting. I know some members will be unhappy with what has happened here. We had no speaker on this, by the way, did we? Or did we? Can I ask Mr. Durham if we had a speaker for this item?
No speaker on this item, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I asked, and I'd be interested to know from our officer whether it is possible, because I know some members have been concerned about potential damage to the tree on this site, whether we could have a bond put on the developer so that were there to be damage to the tree, we could have some sort of prompting, we could have some sort of recompense if that damage happens. I don't, perhaps Mr. Bromley could take us through that and see if that's the case.
Yes, Chair. The officers have explored that possibility, and I'll hand over to Elaine Moulton to give an answer to that query.
Okay. Yes, we can secure a bond through a planning obligation. However, this is an application under Section 73, and there is no ability to require an applicant to enter into a planning obligation in the determination of such an application. So we cannot secure a bond in this particular case.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mrs. Moulton. That's a little disappointing, but if that's how the law stands, that's how the law stands. I invite comment from members if there is any further comment to be made on this item. In that case, sorry.
I think I share the disappointment that the officers have reflected in the report. And I think I would be saying to the applicant, should he be listening, please do his best to make sure that if a tree dies or whatever, that there is a replacement and that they take it seriously.
Thank you, Councillor Reddish. Any further comment from members? Well, you see the recommendation in front of you. Again, I'm going to take a vote by roll call because the screen darts around for reasons I don't understand in these things. If any member's name is not called, please do make me aware of that. But As we stand, I'll ask now whether you are for or against the recommendation. Councillor Williams. You're muted, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. For, as recommended by the report. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
For, as recommended, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Or as the report.
Councillor Burgess. You're muted, Councillor.
Sorry, Chair. For, as recommended.
Councillor Owen.
For, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
For, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
For the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Moffat.
For, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
For, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
For, Chair.
I think that's all the members of the committee, and that therefore that recommendation is therefore passed. We can progress to our next item, item 5, application for major development, land to the north of Shelton Boulevard, etc. Again, there are additional documents as have been circulated, a supplementary report and a further document. And again, I look to our office to see if there's any further comments to be made.
There's no further comments. Thank you.
So once again, I open that item for debate. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just disappointed again that there's no mention of cyclists and pedestrians. I know it's it's going to be a really busy roundabout in the main junction, and welcome it, linking the other side of the main line into an area where, you know, the old Shelton Bar used to still be, used to be a lot of scrub land around there. So I welcome that. But disappointed that the cyclists and that are not included in the recommendations. I did mention it last time, Mr. Chairman, but there we are. We stuck with what the highways have suggested. Thank you.
Yeah, so in a way, I, as a cyclist, I share your reservations, Councillor Williams. It's not a road I would wish to cross on a bike. It has to be said. I think I'll get off and go round as a pedestrian. Any further comment from members? In that case, once again, you see the recommendation in front of you, and I will take the vote by a roll call. So, Councillor Williams.
Permit as recommendation, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit as recommendation.
Councillor Burgess.
Permit as recommended.
Councillor Owen.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield. I can't hear you, Councillor Maxfield. Perhaps there's a...
Permit, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That item, therefore, is also permitted. Let us move on to our next item, item 6, application for major development again, land off Back Lane, Muckleston Road, Market Drayton. And once again, I draw your attention to the additional documentation. Again, I'll look to our office to see if there's any further information we need this evening.
There's nothing further to add.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. Again, I open the item for debate. If we have no comments from members, once again, I will take a vote by roll call. So, Councillor Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
Thanks, Chair. I did put my hand up to speak, but
Oh, I do apologise. I didn't see that. I mean, please speak now. I will retake the vote. That seems to be the fair thing to do.
That's okay, Chair. I was only going to propose it, so that's fine.
Oh, okay. So,
to see that you saw my hand.
I do apologise. I did not. Perhaps I need to magnify my screen. Other councillors who've already cast a vote content that vote is fine. Yeah.
Yes.
In that case, I take it Councillor Northcott is in favour, as he was going to propose it. Councillor Holland.
Well, I was going to vote for permit, but then Councillor Northcott said that he supported it, so I'm not sure. Permit, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jones.
Permit.
Councillor Moffat.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield. Again, I can't hear you, Councillor. I'm not sure why.
Permit, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Burgess.
Permit, Chair.
Thank you. That, I think, is everyone. And again, that item is therefore permitted. Let's move on to item 7 on our agenda. Again, application for major development, Thorpe Precast, 8 Road, Chesterton. Again, there is an additional document that you should have had sight of. And I look to our officers to see if there's any further comment to be made.
Nothing further, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I therefore invite comment from members. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I support this application, but it would be interesting, Chair, to, we've talked about this, visit this particular development, because they come from nowhere, this company, and they've really developed this area in this particular manufacturing process. And we've seen loads of planning applications coming in, and they've really developed that site down there. And it would be interesting to see in there. We talked about this years ago, where we have visits to different planning applications that have gone through, that have mushroomed in our community. So I welcome this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any further comment from members? I'm being very careful now. And I can see no further comments from members, and therefore I propose to put this to the vote. Councillor Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield. Still can't hear you, Councillor. I do apologise.
Permit, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Burgess.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
Permit, Chair.
Thank you. That, I think, is everyone, and that item once again is passed. We now come to agenda item 8, application for minor development, 2 Newcastle Road, Madeley. On this item, we do have a ward councillor, Councillor Gary White, who wishes to speak. Before I invite him to address us, I'll just ask our officers if there's any further information we should all be cognizant of before the councillor speaks.
Well, just to clarify that we haven't received the further comments of the Highway Authority on the amended plans.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Moulton. So now, just in case someone is listening who's not familiar with the protocols for speaking at these meetings, Councillor Gary White has 5 minutes to address the committee. When 4 of those minutes have been elapsed, he will be given an oral warning to make sure that he doesn't miss any points he feels are crucial to his case. And that will be the sum total of the councillors' contribution to the debate this evening. So on those terms, I invite Councillor Gary White to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. We've called this application in before you this evening because of a number of reasons. Firstly, it is in the centre of Madeley Village itself, and it's adjacent to what is known non-officially as the village green, so the central point of the village itself. This area does have outline permission, but the outline permission is for a much smaller development than we believe is currently being put forward in front of you. So particular issues are the size and scale of the current proposal. We do note that originally when we called it in, it was even much larger than what you currently see. However, in our view, it has not been scaled back sufficiently and certainly is too far away from the outline that was granted. So we're objecting in size and scale of the proposal. We encourage you to look at the photographs that we have submitted. It will show you where the site actually lies within the village. It's opposite the Madeley Centre. It's, as I said, adjacent to the village green area, and it is surrounded on two sides by houses which are very close. The current application has not only increased the surface area of the building plot itself, but they've also included 2 attached garages. And it's important to note that the original outline only granted 1. We would encourage you to ask to have a look at the actual overview drawing. You will see that the double garages go right onto the curtilage of the plot and of adjoining houses, which we believe is unacceptable. Madeley Parish Council has strong objections for the same reasons that I'm outlining tonight. And I've also, even today, been approached by local residents with the same concerns. So just to reiterate, we believe that this is overdevelopment. It is too far away from the existing outline permission. We encourage you to look at the double garage in particular with the curtilage and the photographs that have been submitted. And we do ask that you consider refusing this so that the applicant is encouraged to come back at a later date with a more suitable application appertaining to the original outline. And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So 2 things, I think. First of all, I'll invite our officer to comment on what's been said, and then I think it will be useful to see both the plans that are proposed and perhaps also the photographs of the site if we have them this evening.
Yes, well, I haven't got anything that I wish to say in response to what has been said by Councillor White, but I can show the photographs that Councillor White has referred to, which was provided with the representation he made on the planning application. And I can also show you some further site visit photographs that were taken by myself and the plans to explain the development and compare it to what was approved at outline. So outline permission was given and the details of the access, the layout and the scale. A 2-storey dwelling was permitted at that time, and I have the plans showing the layout for your information.
Okay, so if you would do that, Mrs. Moulton, I think that would be very helpful.
Right, I'm going to share Councillor White's photographs first of all. Hopefully you can see that photograph now.
Yes, I can see that. I hope other members can as well.
Okay, so that is the site. So this is New Road. The site is the area of land that has got the Harris fencing across the front. So the village green that was referred to is this corner here, which contains a piece of public art, and to assist members in locating the site on that's Greyhound Court, which is the parade of shops within the heart of the village. So that is the first photograph. Second photograph, when it loads, which hopefully it will do. There we go. So that's showing the corner a little bit more, the village green and the parade of shops. So in front of the site there is a lay-by and a bus stop.
I'm correct in thinking that's the bus route of the number 85 bus, isn't it? That goes to Crewe. Well, that must have obviously returned.
I would expect it would go to Crewe from that location, but I couldn't confirm that that's the right number of the service that you. But yes, no reason to doubt you on that. So yeah, another photograph of the site provided by Councillor White. So so those are the site close up. I can provide some photographs that I've taken, which in some respects overlap, but also show a little bit more of the wider context. So if you bear with me, I can get those plans as well, photographs as well. So hopefully these do seem to be taking a little while to load up, I'm afraid. So hopefully you will see them. So okay, hopefully you see that. That is taken from the car park in front of Greyhound Court. So that's the village green, and the site sits behind those trees to the rear of the green. So this is from Newcastle Road, looking along New Road. So the site is off to the right. So now on New Road, looking along New Road, you'll see that there is the start of a row of semi-detached properties. The site is off to the right, behind the landscaped area there. So opposite, looking towards the site. Apologies for the delay. Hopefully it'll load up soon. Here we go. All right, so this is a view showing the row of semi-detached properties that I referred to. So the site sits at the very end of that row. Right, it doesn't seem to want to load that one up. Might abandon that as it seems to be struggling. So there were a few more photographs showing the site context. So opposite the site is Madeley Centre and Lee Court, and the the area of open space at the end. So it sits in the heart of the village in a mixed setting. I will go to the plans now. So I will show you the approved plan first for for a point of reference. Okay, so this is the approved plan. So as I say, it was an outline planning permission, but the details of the layout and the point of access were approved at that stage. So that property, as approved in the outline planning permission, occupied approximately 20% of the site area. Right, I shall now show you the proposed plan. So this is a large footprint. So this is approximately 37% coverage of the site area. And that was a reduction from the plan as initially submitted, which was approximately 42% of the site covered by building. So I will show you the elevations as proposed now, so you can get an idea of the scale of the building. So whilst it's got a large footprint, in terms of the standard two-storey element, it's a relatively small amount of the footprint, and it does have a side projection which, as you see, sits well back from the front elevation of the property. To the rear of that is a single-storey rear projection, and the double garage that was referred to is a continuation of that side projection off to the side. And the last plan I will show you is the elevations as it was initially submitted. So this was what was submitted before, so a much larger building in terms of its scale and massing. And whilst it was a single garage, the side projecting single storey element of the building was quite wide, as well as the proposed double garage. And I think there is also a street scene which will help you understand the size of the building in the context. So it sits, as I say, next at the end of the row of semi-detached properties. So it's comparable in height to the semi-detached property, but obviously has a much wider footprint. So in terms of the access, it is in the same position, but as the outline plan permission that was approved, but it is wider. So the access that was approved was 3 metres wide, and what is now proposed is 4.5 metres wide. So whilst we haven't had the views of the Highway Authority, I've got no reason to consider that they would object to the position of it, but they may object to the width. But a condition could be imposed on the plan permission to restrict the width of the access to 3 metres, so it is identical to that previously approved. I think I've taken you through everything. Sorry, I couldn't get through all the photographs, but yes, it didn't like to load the last few. But hopefully you've got a reasonable idea of the proposal before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Milton. That's very helpful. Could I just explore, how important do you feel it is that we haven't got the comments of highways on the broader entrance? That seems to be the only part of the jigsaw that's missing here, so to speak.
Given that there hasn't been any changes in the highway situation surrounding the site since they commented upon the outline planning permission, and given that we can compare what is now proposed to what was approved, I think it is reasonable to conclude that they would have no fundamental objections to the access arrangements, subject to, as I mentioned, a possible reduction in the width of it to 3 metres. It's in the same position. It's for a single dwelling of a similar size in terms of the number of bedrooms. In terms of the footprint, yeah, it's undeniably larger, but in terms of the scale of the dwelling itself, it will be similar. So yeah, I think you could confidently assume that they would have no sustainable objections to the proposal as now submitted. As I say, subject to a reduction of the width of it.
Exactly. So could I just explore that a little bit more to make sure that members are clear about this? Were, for example, members to be content with the scheme overall, but are somewhat concerned about the width of the entrance, would it be possible for this application to be passed this evening with the rider that were the Highways Authority to object to that increased width, that this could be permitted, but only with the width as it currently is? Can we do that, or will we have to reject the whole thing? That's what interests me.
No, it is reasonably commonplace for planning committee to grant permission in principle subject to an issue being resolved, such as the views of the Highway Authority being received. So that wouldn't be unusual. I would say that's an acceptable outcome. And yes, if the Highway Authority were to object or were to recommend amendments to the scheme, then obviously we as officers would secure that. But if they had a fundamental objection, we could bring the matter back to committee at a future meeting for the decision to be made by committee at that time.
Okay, thank you very much. All that having been said, I invite comment from members. Councillor Reddish, did you wish to speak there, or are you just picking something up?
I was just wondering if we could actually make the recommendation that we want to go back to the 3 metres. I don't know what colleagues think, whether we could actually say that we would permit it, if that's what we're minded to do, with the amendment that they keep to the 3 metres. Can we actually do that?
I know Councillor Holland wishes to speak. That was a straight question, though. Let's ask Mrs. Moulton if there's a straight answer to it, so that we know where we stand.
Yes, you could grant permission tonight, subject to an additional condition requiring amendments to the access to reduce its width to 3 metres and to get that amended access submitted and approved by the council as a local planning authority.
Thank you. So now Councillor Holland and then Councillor Williams. Sorry, Councillor Very, should I cut you off there? I apologise.
No, I was just saying thank you.
Councillor Holland, then Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of access, it seems to me, was determined at the outline planning stage. And initially, under the plans that we briefly glimpsed that our officer did show us, the applicant came back with a full reserved matters application with an entirely different access. And that is why the Highways Authority objected. So I think if we've already granted outline consent for access of 3 metres in a particular location, then we don't need to grant further permission now. It is a thing that has been resolved. And if the applicant doesn't amend their plans with the original access, I'm not really interested in hearing it. I think we can enforce what we've already decided would have been a safe access and was not objected to by the Highways Authority. In practical terms, making the access wider, it doesn't bother me, except that looking at the site plan, that lay-by that forms the access opening, it serves a bus stop, and therefore the wider that access point is, in my view, the more difficult it is to safely navigate it for buses coming down the road and pulling up there, perhaps for pedestrians trying to cross that space. Pedestrians are likely to want to walk there because it serves a bus stop. That's where they're likely to want to go to. So I would suggest that 3 metres is the proper width. It's been approved already. 3 metres in the location that was approved at outline stage, and that should be a condition if we are minded to approve this tonight. But looking at the plans that are in front of us, it seems to me that this is a radically different building that's being proposed than was approved at outline stage. And I'm a cynic. I believe that if I was a planning applicant, if I was a landlord, I would do the same. I would put in an application and then I'd chance my arm. I would bid for whatever I thought was the largest, most bulky, most expensive thing I would be able to get on the site. And it's all well and good for us to look at tonight and to be shown what we could have had, what would have been unacceptable to the planning officers, and to say, oh, we're not having that, we're having something that's smaller. But what's being proposed is still, was it 17% larger footprint than was on the indicative drawing? I think people have got to be honest, applicants have got to be honest when they come forward about what it is they're proposing. And I would be very happy to see something that was in line with the indicative drawing. But by joining the separate detached garage onto the property, extending the property to the side and to the rear, that seems to me to be pushing the envelope a bit much. We are being asked to approve tonight something that is very different from what was approved at outline, and I believe we could sustain on that basis a refusal of this application, but I'd be interested to hear what other members have got to say.
Again, I think if Councillor Williams will bear with us, I'm mindful he wishes to speak, but perhaps we should, though, have the comments of our officers on what Councillor Holland has just said, because it may affect the way the debate goes.
Well, we cannot, because this is to reserve matters application, it doesn't follow that it has to adhere to what was approved at outline stage. So they are entitled to submit an amended scheme with an amended access arrangement, which they have done, and they have adjusted it, so it is an improvement on it. But if members consider that the only access that is acceptable and the only access that we know the Highway Authority has accepted is a 3 metre wide access, then that would need to be secured through a condition of planning permission. In terms of the scale of the dwelling, yes, this has a larger footprint than what was approved at outline stage, and it is a 2-storey property, so it's of a similar scale, but the footprint has an impact on its impact on the street scene. So it's definitely a material consideration, but it cannot be refused just on the basis that it is larger than what has previously been approved. You have to be satisfied that what is now being proposed is harmful to the street scene at the scale and massing as now proposed, that causes harm and is unacceptable because it is detrimental to the character and appearance of the area. So it's not as simple as just saying it is larger than what has previously been approved, so therefore it's unacceptable. You have to also conclude that it is unacceptable because it is harmful to the character and appearance of the area.
Okay, so again, just to make sure that everybody's clear where we stand, were, for example, Councillor Holland to take that view, he would be perfectly in order to propose refusal on those grounds, or would that be an illegitimate thing to do?
Yes, it is a reasonable recommendation or thing to move that this is the proposal is of a scale and massing that is harmful to the character and appearance of the area. So on those grounds, that would be a reason for refusal that could a case could be prepared to defend should an appeal be lodged against that reason. It is a legitimate reason.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moulton. I think that clears up where we stand. Let's go on to Councillor Williams, and I think Councillor Northcott wishes to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Listening to the debate and listening to the local councillor, then we saw that the plans, the frontal plans, it's just the width of that with the house and then the garages included. But I say, am I right in saying that it's the same height as the houses in New Road? Looking at front to the left, and it steps down to the village, the green, as you want to, the junction, main junction there, Newcastle, into the interior of the village. So they did quite clever in that, but it's that width really that a little bit of concern. But could I first ask the height and against the houses in New Road and also the houses behind in Newcastle Road?
Again, Mrs. Moulton, perhaps if you showed perhaps that street scene thing which had the adjacent property on, that might be helpful for the councillor.
Hopefully you can see that now. So
yeah.
That's the property as proposed. That greyed out outline is the existing property adjoining the site. So as you can see, the ridge height is the same or very, very similar. And as the properties on Newcastle Road, so the ones that back onto this site, are a similar scale to the properties on New Road, then I can confirm that it is a comparable height to those properties too.
To you, Chair, could I ask the officer is the property, when you go to the small double as you move along, is that set back or is it on the same level? Are they all the main house, and then it looks like auxiliary building, and then the garages? Are they all on the same
Same building line, councillor, yeah?
set back in any way?
Oh, yeah.
So the main two-story element is that bit of the property that sits forward, and then it steps back to the side two-story element, and then it goes down to the garages. So the garages on the two-story side projection sit 6.279 meters back from the front boundary of the site.
And the gardens within the right size and for that development.
Well, the garden is small, and it is a short in length at parts. It is marginally below the standard separation distance between principal windows and the rear elevations of adjoining properties, but it's not that far short of it, and that is picked up within the report. So yeah, this is the garden area. So it is constrained. It's not as large as certain garden areas, but it's usable. It's of a size to be adequate and useful. But it's the nature of the site. Yeah, it's not a particularly deep site from the front boundary to the rear boundary. So to get a property on there and achieve a large garden wouldn't be possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Northcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's an interesting debate, this one. Just playing devil's advocate, I'd probably be happy to keep the access to the original outline. But having said that, I'm not quite sure I'm fully in support of Councillor Holland's comments. And I'm not quite sure that the harm has been demonstrated to how the revision from the original outline has changed. Now, you're quite right, Mr. Chair. You mentioned the fact that you know, this is significantly different. But that being said, that they have reduced the height in some parts of the building, so they've obviously acknowledged the impact the build would have on the area, been sympathetic with that, but obviously want to maximise as much of the development as they quite rightly would do as an applicant and owner. I would do the same. But I'm happy to listen to the debate a bit further, but I just can't see at the moment how we can demonstrate that there's actual harm being done here above what has already been agreed at outline. If I'm being honest, I can't. I know it's substantially different to the original outline, but I can't actually see the harm factor yet. But I'll listen to the debate, and I'll keep an open mind on this. Thank you.
Any further comments from members? I don't know if Mr. Fleet wished to speak at that point, whether he was gesturing to speak or whether he's just moving his hand.
I'm moving my hand, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fleet. Just wanted to make sure, that's all, especially having been put straight by Councillor Northcott. So, you got any further comment from members? Councillor Holland and Councillor Reddish? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, we've seen two imaginary buildings tonight, haven't we? We've seen a building which isn't going to be put up, which is what was granted at outline planning. And we've seen another imaginary building that, again, nobody is intending to put up, which represents the initial form of this planning application. And those are two, they're not going to happen, but those are two things that we can peg our thoughts to. Now, I think of the first application, the one that was approved at outline, as something that clearly wouldn't meet the standards of harm and that we could all vote for. And I would imagine that most councillors would say the other application, the one that looked enormous and had 3 stories and was plainly huge, would be something that we would disapprove. And the application that is in fact in front of us tonight is somewhere in between the two. I am still inclined to agree with the views expressed by the ward member and the objection that's been made by the local parish council. So I would like Chair to move to refuse the application on the basis of those objections, the size and the massing, the width that Councillor William talks about, and also the harm to residential amenity of not meeting that standard of space between buildings. I understand our officer's comments that it's only slightly less, 2 or 3 metres less than the standard that we set ourselves, but it is not in excess of it. It is below the threshold, and my view is that we should take a line, and that's the line. The local councillors are telling us, the local parish council is telling us that this is a harmful application, and in my view, having had a look at it, yes, it is too large. I think we're not looking now at the plans that are in front of us for approval tonight. But if we remember, the outprint, the footprint of that outline application was broadly in line with number 1 on that road going down. And if we were looking at something that was that size and shape, that was as if you'd taken one of those pair of semis and separated them and you plonked that on the application site with a detached garage, that's effectively what was approved last time. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it, but I am concerned that this is overdevelopment. And on the basis that that's the view that's been represented to us tonight by the people who know it best in the local area, those would be the grounds on which I'm moving refusal, Chair. I don't know if anyone would be prepared to second me.
Well, we'll ask Councillor Reddish to speak first, and then Councillor Jones, I think, wished to speak, and then they may wish to second you, of course, Councillor. And if not, I will then look for a seconder for that motion.
I'm minded to echo Councillor Northcott's comments. I'm not convinced that we have sufficient evidence to go for refusal. So I would be minded to permit it, but with the original outline planning permission for the 3 metre access. So I'm quite happy to sort of support that, propose it. Just in case, Chair, you haven't seen it, Mr. Fleet's hand is up.
Yeah, but we've got Councillor Jones first, and then we will then move to Mr. Fleet. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to this quite intently, actually, and I find myself sat on the middle ground between Councillor Holland's proposal and Councillor Northcott's, not putting them either sides of the spectrum, but Councillor Northcott's very articulate reasons for why he wouldn't initially feel that he would support that. I'm actually going to second Councillor Holland. I think having listened to his exceptionally articulate argument, coupled with a respect to the detailed knowledge of the local members and their firm awareness of the area, I'd be inclined to side with local members in terms of where I fall on this. So I'm quite happy to formally second this for the reasons outlined by Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I think Mr. Fleet wished to make a comment.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In terms of the concerns that the building is too large, I can understand where that's coming from because of the sort of outline, which in itself has sort of set that image of what is the appropriate building for the site. It's a reference point, I acknowledge that, but at appeals, should the applicants go down that route, that will be put to one side to a certain degree during the site visit. And at that point, the inspector will walk up and down the street. They will look at the context of the neighbouring properties, take a number of vantage points and say, is this right for the area, the current proposal? That is all they will look at, is the current scheme under consideration. The outline will be put to one side at that point. And in terms of judging those viewpoints, I think it's coming back from the T-junction by the shops. As people head northeast along the road, they will see in their sort of right-hand eye line the new building that is being proposed, how that will sit. And as that emerges in the street scene, it's those lower tiered parts of the building that first are closest to people, but they're stepped back from the curb line further than the proposed house. And there's that terracing as it gently or it rises up. I'll step away from trailer, but it rises up to the height of the proposed building. And the proposed building itself is comparable in height to what is the neighbour that is already there. So in terms of too large, that reference point of the neighbouring property or anything else is difficult to sort of pinpoint and say this is larger than something else. The plans show it, and on the ground it shows the proposed buildings being similar to the neighbouring property. And again, another viewpoint is coming out of the centre, driving forward from that sort of car park onto the side road. But in terms of position of the building, it's got the same setback from the main pavement line. It's a similar height. As officers, we see that being read as a similar appearance of building. So in the eye line, it will be that height and the neighbouring building at a similar height. If it was closer to the curb line, you get this sense of perspective. The further back building seems smaller, the closer building would appear bigger. But the layout of the site doesn't help that. I think it's going to be difficult for us to actually point an inspector and say the building is too large because. It's that part of the detail that's going to be the more difficult part to convince an inspector around the reason for refusal. Now, as members, if there is something within that design, within that scheme that you think it's actually this that makes the building look bigger, and I think the earlier sort of dormers on the roof might have been part of that, but they've been taken away. If there is something that sort of you feel is the bit that emphasises an enhanced scale, that would be a part we could use in any appeal and push an argument. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pleat. That, I suppose, is, first of all, Councillor Holland is the member who's proposed refusal. I don't know whether he would feel it appropriate to incorporate reference to a specific feature in that motion. I'll ask him now because the motion has been proposed and seconded, and therefore we will proceed to a vote on it. So I don't know, Councillor, are you just happy with the motion as you formulated with general references to size and massing?
I'm happy with the formulation that I've given, Chair. The building that's proposed is in all three dimensions larger than its neighbour. Now, I appreciate that the site is a different shape, but the garden, for example, at the rear of this proposed property is shorter than the neighbouring property on the same road. And yet the depth of what's being proposed is deeper. So from the front door to the back door of this property is further than the comparable unit that's next along. It's wider because we've talked a lot about the width of the property, and it is taller as well. I know our officer has referred again to it being of a comparable height, but I believe the ridge height of the proposed property is higher by a number of inches than the next property along. So that is my contention, and those would be the terms in which I would express my concern about the massing of the.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Before I proceed to a vote, is there any other contribution any councillor wishes to make? In that case, we've had a proposal that this item be refused for the reasons outlined by Councillor Holland. And therefore, I propose to take a vote on Councillor Holland's motion. So if you vote for Councillor Holland's motion, you are voting to refuse this application. Councillor Williams.
Against refusal, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
Against refusal, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
The heavy heart, I'm against, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
For.
Councillor Burgess.
Sorry, Chair. Against, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
For, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
For, Chair.
I'll just ask our clerk, but I think that means that that motion falls by a more than one vote.
Yes, the motion falls, Chair. It's 8 against and 3 for refusal.
Thank you very much. So that motion is refused, is fails. So we're still left with the question of what we wish to do. Now, at this point, two things have been mooted in our debate. One is that we permit, but we're retaining the original width of the access. The other would simply, of course, be to permit. So again, I look for a steer from members of the committee as to which of those two motions someone wishes to propose we vote upon.
I'm proposing that we permit, but with the outline access of 3 metres.
Do I have a seconder for that motion?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so it's been proposed and seconded that we permit this item, but with the original access width of 3 metres. And again, I'm going to take a vote on that by roll call. So this time, if you vote for, you are voting for permit with that extra condition that we retain the 3 metres entrance. Councillor Williams.
Permit, Chair, with the recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
For, Chair, with the recommendations.
When you say for the recommendations, you mean with the 3 metres, is that correct?
Yeah. Sorry, Chair.
Okay. I just want to make absolutely sure that we know what we're voting for.
With the condition.
Councillor Owen.
For, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
For with the condition.
Councillor Holland.
That additional condition for, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Reddish.
For with the condition.
Councillor Burgess.
For with the condition.
Councillor Cooper.
For, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
For, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
For with the conditions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. That, I think, is everyone, and I think that has been passed unanimously. That being the case, I think we can move to our next item on the agenda, item 10, which is application for other development, number 4 Road Lane, Newcastle. Again, there is an additional document on your agenda which I draw your attention to, and I'll just ask our officer if there are any further comments to be made before we begin our debate.
Number 9, Chair.
You are quite right, Councillor. My finger has moved up and down. This is where electrical things are a terrible thing compared to paper things. Let us go back with apologies to item 9 so that we do the agenda in order. So that's application for minor development and 22 King Street, Crossheath. I do apologise. Once again, I draw your attention to a supplementary report, which should be circulated to you. And again, I ask our officer whether there is any further comment to be made this evening.
At this stage, Chair, there's nothing further to report. Thank you.
Thank you. So at that point, I invite comment from members.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we may have a speaker on this item.
Okay, the list that was last list that was given to me doesn't seem to have one, but if I am wrong in that, and we have a speaker, do we have a speaker in the waiting room? If we do, we certainly should let them speak.
I think Mr. Hindley, who's in the waiting room, has made a request to speak.
I have him. Sorry, that's possibly because I have him down on item 11. So if that's just a paperwork error, we must have him now. I don't know if perhaps our clerk can check that. Here is Mr. Hindley. I'll ask Mr. Hindley directly if he'll unmute himself. Do you so wish to speak on this particular item, the one in King Street, Crossheath?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay, in that case, once again, before I invite you to speak, let me just outline once again the rules for speaking, which are that you have 5 minutes to address the committee, which will be timed by our clerk. After 4 minutes, you will be given an oral warning to make sure that you don't run out of time to make any points you regard as crucial. And that is the sum contribution to our debate this evening. So on those terms, and apologies for the administrative error there, I invite you to address the committee.
Hello, good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed, yes.
Yeah, I understand that some points for the refusal of this application would be accepted on the basis of the inspector's view on a previous appeal decision for a previous application. However, on this new application, there are some important differences with the application for this background development. And on these grounds, I believe it should be refused in its current state. The BS 5837 tree survey and arboricultural impact assessment provided for this new application by Peter Jackson, dated 25th of December 2020, is in fact the same report as presented originally for application 19-00135 FUL, the original application, dated 18th of December 2018. In that report, it states in 3.3.06 that this report is for the sole use of the client at that time being Mr. Jonathan Fowle, and also goes on to say, use by any other persons in attempting to use the contents for any other purpose renders the report invalid for that purpose. Also, in the original report, point 3.05, the contents of this report are valid for 1 year. Now, this report is over 2 years old and not for use by anyone other than the previous owner of number 22. It is an invalid report. Now, I know this is inaccurate and invalid and out of date because it shows on the report that T15, tree 15 eucalyptus is in good structural and physical condition with an estimated life contribution of 20 to 40 years. But this tree was in our back garden and it fell down 18 months later after the original report in June 2020. And yet it still appears on a report dated December 2020. It had been down for 6 months. This is not a new report and not a valid report. It also has other inaccuracies, such as T18 ash is in our back garden, but is in fact in the back garden of number 26. It also states that T8 laurel is stated to be in fair physical and poor structural condition. But I did send some photos in on an email yesterday with the presentation, and hopefully you can see from those photos that it's approximately 30 foot tall and thriving. More importantly, T18 laurel and T16 laurel, as part of this report, form a part of our shared boundary, and we, myself and my wife, don't agree to their removal. Interestingly, this report is not the one accepted at the appeal of the original application. That report was done by arboricultural consultant Ian Murat, dated 19th of September 2019, and was used to replace the original report done by Peter Jackson after the planning committee refused the application. Another point I'm asking for refusal is that the western boundary lines of the development on all the plans show a small wire fence, which I erected about 20 years ago to prevent our dog from going through the hedges. The true shared boundary is through the centre line of the hedges and has been so since the hedges were built in the 1930s. My wife and I then planted the laurels in the boundary about 20 years ago when I erected the small wire fence. These reports are inaccurate and invalid. I have ignored the planning department. Sorry, I have informed the planning department. I've informed Mr. Nijar, the developer,
1 minute.
GS Architectural Designs in writing, but had no response. Is that 1 minute?
Yes, Mr. Hendley.
Okay. I've also seen no plans for a 5-metre access drive as approved by the appeal to the previous application. The Highways Authority refuses permission with the current width of the access from 3.3 metres. The latest construction and management plan shows, the latest construction management plan shows welfare and storage unit, material storage, site parking right next to our hedgerows at this level with no route area. The turning circles shown do not account for a 5th vehicle such as visitors, emergency vehicles, grocery delivery vehicles and parking delivery vehicles being able to turn in the parking area without reversing up the driveway and back onto the road. The access drive has no safe pedestrian access down.
Okay, Mr. Hindley, I think you've come to the end of your 5 minutes, so I would ask you to leave it there if you will. But I think you've given a fair coverage of your feelings, if that's all right.
Yes, yes, Chair. It's not just feelings; they are facts.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right. First of all, I'd like our officer to comment on what they've heard so far.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, Mr. Hindley has obviously submitted a number of objections to the planning application, which have been recorded in the main agenda report and the supplementary report. As part of the recommendation that's been prepared by officers, we have consulted with the landscape development section. They have deemed the tree information that's been submitted to be satisfactory and have raised no objections, subject to the recommended conditions regarding tree protection measures and submission and approval of a landscaping scheme. The submitted tree information arboricultural impact assessment does outline the trees that are going to be retained, as well as the trees that are going to be removed. Obviously, as time has moved on since the appeal decision, which is obviously an extant planning permission that is capable of being implemented at any time within the specified 3 years. So that can be carried out, and that is on the basis of the tree information that was submitted at the time. As I say, the time does move on, and if a tree has been felled in the meantime or has fallen over due to ill health, then whilst that is unfortunate, there's not a great deal that we can do regarding that. We may be able to, as part of the landscaping scheme that we're asking to be submitted, seek replacement tree planting to compensate any loss since that tree report was done. But I don't believe that those matters that have been raised by Mr. Hindley should prevent the councillors from making a decision on the application and refusing the application on those grounds. In terms of the other comments made by Mr. Hindley, I can refer to some of those as I display the plans if members wish me to do that. I've got the approved plans from the appeal, as well as the plans that are now proposed, and we've also got an additional plan which shows the two schemes superimposed on each other to show in particular the difference in height and the eaves heights.
In the light of what we've heard, Mr. Bromley, I think that the display of those plans will be very helpful.
Okay, just bear with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the proposed site layout plan for the appeal. So this is the layout that was granted at appeal. I'm starting with this because I just think it'll help you to see the difference a little bit better. So in the appeal decision, the proposal was for a pair of semi-detached properties. Sorry, can you see that, by the way?
No.
I can't, no.
Sorry, I haven't shared it. Operator error.
I can see it now, Mr. Bromley.
Yeah, thank you. So
I
this is.
hope other members can as well.
So this is the, as I say, this is the layout that was granted on appeal, and it's for a pair of semi-detached properties in a backland location to the rear of number 22 King Street. There are properties to the right here, just off Derwent Place. I believe they're called New Gardens, a development that's called New Gardens. So this is that layout that was granted on appeal, and we've also got the elevation plans, which show a 2.5 story pair of semi-detached properties. So now I'll move on to the proposed dwellings, and I've got a 3D image. So the difference between the in terms of the design of the scheme to that which was granted on appeal is that rather than a pair of semi-detached properties, they're now proposing 2 detached properties, and they're shown on the on this 3D image. You've got the this image here showing the front elevation. There's a separation distance between the 2 detached dwellings. But in terms of the overall height of the proposal, the ridge height is broadly, if not identical, to the previously approved scheme. And in terms of the layout, that is again broadly the same as what was previously approved. The difference being is that it's rather than a pair of dwellings, semi-detached, it's two detached dwellings. So in terms of the comparison between the two, that is illustrated in this plan here, and I'll just zoom into the relevant image. So this image here, the shaded area is the original design shown there, and the outline area is the proposed dwelling. So the difference is that the proposal as part of this application would have a greater eaves height, but would be a shallower roof pitch, but the ridge height would be broadly, if not identical to the previous scheme. In terms of the access arrangements, again they broadly remain the same. So access is coming off King Street. It passes the front garden or parking area of number 22, then passes the gable end of number 22 until you get into the existing rear garden of number 22, where the proposed dwellings would be located. The appeal decision, as I say, is extant, so that agrees the principle of the backland location and the 2 dwellings on the site. It's all about whether that change in design is now materially harmful to the character and appearance of the area. And also there are, as I set out in the main agenda report, whether the slight change in access arrangements in terms of the fact that the applicant or the owner has now erected a fence, whether that is still acceptable or not. As I set out in the recommendation, officers believe that conditions can secure acceptable visibility and that no gates and fences obstruct that visibility. But for added comfort, we did want the comments of the Highways Authority, and unfortunately they've not been received as yet, but officers are satisfied that conditions could ensure that there's an acceptable access achieved, but we would prefer to wait for Highways officers' comments before issuing a decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bromley. And I think the important thing, as Mr. Bromley has stressed, to consider with members here is that there is an extant valid planning permission on this site. So there is a fallback position, so to speak, for this development. I think we've got Councillor Holler. Councillor Williams, did you wish to speak on this item? In that case, please go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As members can see, this development, back garden development, is appalling. But as you pointed out, there's a planning permission on there, and the first planning permission, the officer and the planning officer did a good report, but was overturned by the planning inspector. So we have got a planning permission on there, but for two sets of houses. Now they want just two houses, but they're dormer houses. Have you noticed with the skylights in the roof? We call them dormer, a 2-story with a dormer in the roof, and 2 detached dwellings in a back garden is really, just over the top. But again, we've been given permission by the planning inspectorate. It all comes in to what I'm thinking is the highways. And if I'm right in reading the report, we're waiting for the highways to make a decision, and then we can refuse or whatever on that decision. That'll be left to the officers. But I just can't find a way of refusing this planning application, Mr. Chairman, because of the existing planning permission by the inspectorate. It's said to keep in, we could go on and on about it, but it's been given planning permission. Slightly changed the size of the 2 dwellings against the original plans. And I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. I've listened to the debate. But other than the highways, and then just make the point is at the front of the officer made the point of the fence. They have dropped the fence down to 1 metre. So as you come out, you can turn, you can see left, and you can see right through the steel railings next to the Workingmen's Club. So you can actually see the movement on the highway when you come out. So that's been done by the developer. And you can see the upset of Mr. Henley having this kind of development in his back garden, more or less. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. I'd be interested to hear the debates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Northcott. Councillor Northcott, are you with us? You're muted, Councillor. You're now unmuted. Do you wish to speak on this item?
No, thank you, Chair.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I've had a notification from our clerk that you did, but I do apologise. Councillor Holland, do you wish to speak on this item?
I hadn't indicated, Chair, but seeing as you've asked me, I agree with Councillor Williams. This is an example of an application where there is extant permission on the site. Now, we didn't grant it, we didn't want it, but the planning inspector has trumped us. And in my view, there is no way really to distinguish what we've got in front of us from the extant permission in a way that adds harm to the development. So with regret, I'll be voting in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jones.
Okay, I was a little bit concerned to hear that we hadn't received the comments back from Highways regarding which I understand, please correct me if I've understood this incorrectly, represents one of the changes that have occurred from the extant permission to what we have in front of us today. Given that our officers have not received those comments from Highways, and given that that would be a determinant factor on whether to grant the permission or not, I think it would be wise to move this item onto a later meeting. I would like to see this item come back again, but I would like to see it come back when we have all of the information in front of us. So I would move that we consider this application at a later date when that information from Highways is forthcoming.
Okay, so that basically is a suggestion that we defer this item at this meeting. Yep. Mr. Fleet, did you wish to speak on this item? I'm not sure, Mr. Fleet.
I'm listening to the debate at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Could perhaps one of our officers help us as regards the Highways issue? So we could, as Councillor Jones suggests, say that we don't feel we have adequate information about this, although once again, do remember, of course, that there is a valid fallback position at this juncture. On the other hand, could we also say that we would delegate the decision to our officers on receipt of that Highways information? I think we more or less know what our officers would say in that regard. But we do have a duty to determine things with due alacrity. So I'm nervous of deferral simply for the sake of deferral, so to speak. I don't know if one of our officers can guide us on what they feel about this issue and the lack of Highways information.
Yes, Chair, I can comment on that. Firstly, I'd just like to say that the applicant has indicated that if members felt it necessary, that they would be willing to agree an extension of time to the statutory determination period, so it could come back to a later planning committee. So they have indicated that they would be willing to do that. But from the planning officer's point of view, there's obviously an extant planning permission for similar, if not pretty much near to the same access arrangements as this proposal. It's just the fact that the applicant in the intervening period has erected a fence, which obviously results in some restrictions in terms of visibility. Now, Councillor Williams touched on the point that the fence has now been removed, and officers are content that planning conditions can be imposed to ensure that acceptable visibility displays are achieved before the houses are brought into occupation. The reason for the recommendation was purely just added comfort, and we did expect Highways to provide comments before the meeting. It was just for that added comfort, really.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bromley. So really, I think members have a straight decision to make here, whether we feel that there is merit in seeing the Highways information. If our applicant is not aggrieved in that respect, we could defer this item, or we could go ahead and determine it if members think that appropriate this evening. So what I'm looking for is a steer from the committee as to which of those roads they feel they want to go down. Councillor Williams, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As far as deferral is concerned, we have time to defer it and look at it again. And it'd be interesting to see the Highways thoughts on the turning circle within the site. As far as I can see, the access and egress, that's sorted, but it's the internal movement of vehicles. So I would go along with to put it back until we have more information from the Highways or what their decision is. It's really interesting, and it impacts on quite a few of these backland developments that are coming in to the committee. So I'd like to thank you. Go on, Sally.
No. So in other words, were Councillor Jones to propose deferral, you would be willing to second. Is that correct?
Correct, thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams, do you wish to speak? You're muted, Councillor.
Chair. Apologies, Chair. I'd like to go for deferment, Chair. On the grounds, as Councillor Jones has actually said, it is important. It's a very busy place. It's next to a club, so you can imagine how busy it really is. And I do think we should wait for the answers.
Okay, so given that we've now had this a formal proposal, I take it that's correct, Councillor Jones, for deferral, which has been seconded, that it will be futile to pursue the debate were such a vote to be passed. So I'm going to take a vote for deferral now, and if that vote falls, we will continue our debate thereafter. Otherwise, obviously, the item will be deferred. So I'm going to take that vote now by roll call. So if you vote for, you are voting for the proposal that this item be deferred. Councillor Williams.
For deferral, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
For deferment, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
For, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
For deferral, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
For deferral, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
For deferral.
Councillor Northcott.
For deferral, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
For deferral, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
For deferral, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
For deferral, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
For deferral, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that was a unanimous vote. Certainly was a clear majority for deferral. So that item is deferred. And we can now progress to where I thought we were, mistakenly, which is item 10, application for other development, number 4, Row Lane. Again, there is an additional document which has been circulated, and I'll just ask our officer if there's any further comments to be made before we progress to a debate.
Nothing further to report, Chair.
Thank you very much. In that case, I invite comment from members. If there are no comments,
recommendation.
okay, thank you, Councillor Reddish. I will move to a vote on the recommendation. Councillor Williams.
Apologise.
You'll mute. Was that four? Was that four, Councillor?
Oh, sorry, Chair. Yeah, miles away. Yeah, 4.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
For, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Permit.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
In favour, Chair.
Again, I think I'm correct in saying that that was a unanimous vote, and therefore that recommendation is passed. That brings us to item 11 of our agenda, application for other development, number 1, Beresford Crescent, Newcastle-under-Lyme. On this item, and again, I stand to be corrected by our clerk, but my understanding is we have 2 speakers this evening. First, the ward councillor, Councillor Simon Tagg, and then a supporter of the scheme, Dr. Shamand. Once again, the protocol is that the councillor speaks first, and then the supporter speaks second. Both of those individuals have 5 minutes to address the committee. An oral warning will be given when 4 of those minutes have elapsed to ensure that crucial points are not missed. And that will be the sum total of their contribution to our debate this evening. So on those terms, I invite first Councillor Simon Tagg to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. And what I will do, I will immediately turn my video off again because I'm having some connection issues. So the audio is more important than seeing me. So I'd rather that was heard rather than seen. So I'll just do that. But I'm speaking this evening as a resident on behalf of residents of my ward as a Westlands Ward Council. I've also called in this application with a colleague. There's been over 50 objections submitted by local residents living in Beresford Crescent and Pilkington Avenue to this application. And there are 4 areas of objection: the design and scale of the proposed 2-storey side extension, highways and parking concerns, the impact on trees, and the extent to which the property is being used as an HMO. Objections to the 2-storey side extension centre around its size and mass in a prominent position on the corner of Beresford Crescent, that it detracts materially from the character of the original dwelling and the integrity and the original design of a group of dwellings that form the street scene, so is contrary to planning policy. Also, that the extension isn't set back far enough and still stands in front of the building line of Beresford Crescent. That is different from any other extension in the area given permission in recent years, which has been required they have been required to step back before given permission. Policy 818, design for residential extensions, states an extension should not distract materially from the character of the original dwelling or from the integrity of the original design of a group of dwellings that form the street scene. In the view of those residents that object and myself, this development isn't in keeping in character of the local area and the street scene. Regarding highways and parking concerns, we've seen revised plans since the original committee report that appear to be softening of the objections from the Highway Authority. I would like to know whether that is the case or not. The highways originally stated in order to meet the local planning standards for a dwelling of 4 bedrooms or more, there must be 3 off-street parking spaces, and that this application failed to demonstrate that was adequate, with there being not adequate off-road parking. Section 109 of the planning framework, development says that development provides for significant less parking than the maximum specified level will not be permitted if this would create or aggravate a local on-street parking or traffic problem. This is right near the junction of Beresford Crescent, and there's already an on-street parking problem. And given the potential number of vehicles and the provision of only 2 parking spaces in the amended plans on the site, this fails to meet the requirements, I believe, and residents believe, that the Highway Department has obviously implications for on-street parking, and the original recommendation of refusal by the Highways Authority should stand. Impact on trees. Notwithstanding the content of the supplementary report, there are still concerns relating to trees, given the unsustainability of the 2 parking spaces as discussed previously. There's also concern relating to the highway trees on the grass verge. It is believed that this property is already operating as an HMO and has done in the past, and is therefore not a residential development for a single family, and that it was advertised as a 6-bedroom HMO, house of multiple occupation, in January 2021. Though the property status is not a material concern to this planning application, if the committee are minded to permit, they should explore with officers the condition to limit the number of bedrooms to ensure the position relating to car parking is addressed. But I hope that the planning committee will consider the key objections put forward today by myself on behalf of residents, and that is the design and scale of the proposed extension and the highway and parking concerns, and decide to refuse this application this evening, given that it will detract materially from the character of the original dwelling and the integrity of the street scene. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I now invite a supporter of the scheme, Dr. Shamila Samad, to speak to the committee on the same terms. Dr. Shamad. Yes.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
I can indeed, yes.
Hello all, thank you for allowing me to speak. So I'm the applicant in this case. This is my home that I'm planning to extend, and that's what the application is for. I have listened intently to Councillor Tagg's summary on the situation. I'd like to address each of those points. In number 1, in terms of the design and scale, similar properties have had extensions approved in the recent past. The proposed extension to my property is 4 metres wide. A matter of weeks ago, another property sitting on a corner plot a few hundred yards down the same street on a smaller corner plot, should I say, on a tight T-junction, with a width of 4.6 metres was approved. We've worked with the planning officer in this case, and I agree with her determinations that the extension does not fall in the build line due to the position of the property and the alignment of the property on the plot of land that it sits. The property is stepped back, as examples given in the written representations beforehand, and the ridge is reduced in height compared to the original property. It is smaller than the size of the original dwelling, so it's not overbearing. And we've worked, as I've said, with the planning officer in regards to this. In terms of the highways, again, the officer has worked with us to come to, we've worked together to agree that the off-street parking she feels is sufficient in terms of the size of the property. There is a cycle store where the garage is, which could also house a vehicle, and there's adequate parking off-road for 2 cars at least. We do not anticipate that any more than 2 vehicles will be required off-road parking at this property. However, I must say that along the road, other properties may have space for 2 cars, but there are people that choose to park their properties on and off the road. On this end of the street, there's an open sweeping aspect, and we've never had to park on that sweeping aspect, causing any obstruction or visibility issues. In regards to trees, landscaping have concluded that there's no concerns, and they only would want conditions in terms of Harris fencing to protect the one tree which is on the outside boundary, which is the council-owned tree. And in terms of the other concerns, I believe the objections are purely based on assumptions and speculations. The residents cannot determine or prove what they think may happen and object on that basis. This is not a material planning matter. I am planning, the application I put in is for a residential home, and that's what I'm planning to extend the house for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samad. Before I move to a debate, I'd just like to ask our officer if they wish to comment on what they've heard so far.
Yes. Obviously, I think it would assist members if you could view the extension as now proposed. I'd like to share the plans if you're happy for me to do that at this stage before.
Absolutely, Mrs. Moulton. And if there are any photographs, I think those would also be helpful if you have any.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll start with the plan. So hopefully you will be able to see that now, or if not now, soon.
Yes, I can see that perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. So this is the images to the left of the plan are the plans as existing. So it's a semi-detached property with a hipped roof, and what is proposed is a side extension, which is approximately 2/3 of the width of the existing property frontage. And following amendments to the scheme, there is now a 300mm setback and a drop-in ridge line. So that setback and drop-in ridge line will be discernible. It is of sufficient size to be visually noticeable. So it will appear, in your officer's opinion, subordinate in terms of its scale and appearance. So it sits on the side of the property there. I will show you the block plan, which will help you see the property in the context. So it is a corner property. So the adjoining property sits on Pilkington Avenue, the semi-detached property. So it's on the corner of Borough Crescent, and there is a property opposite on the other corner of Borough Crescent with a similar side extension, a slightly greater setback, but a similar side extension nevertheless. I can show you a image of that property opposite. When this is from Google Street View, so you'll see that there is the extension as constructed on 2 Beresford.
So I'm correct in thinking, Mrs. Moulton, that the gable end without the black lines, the vertical black lines going down, is the extension. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, everything that with that gable and the bay window to the left, that's the extension. So you'll see it's got a break-in ridge line as is proposed on 1 Beresford Crescent, and it is set back, and that is similarly to.
Could I just advise you, Mrs. Moulton, your microphone is fading a little.
Okay, is that any better?
That's much better, thank you. I'm
not entirely sure that the microphone on this is working. It might be the laptop, so I'll lean forward and hopefully you'll catch everything I say. So yes, it's a similar width in proportion to the original width of the property. So again, it's 2/3 the width of the original, which is similar to what is proposed. I will show you some photographs. Hopefully they will load a little quicker than the last lot I sought to show you. So that's the existing front of the property. The garage, which forms part of the curtilage and is to be used for the parking of cycles or the storage of cycles, is that building there. So that's looking at the side that's to be extended with the garage, which is a single garage and would probably accommodate a car, but it would be tight. So that's directly looking onto the side elevation. Here we go, another image of the side elevation with the access onto Beresford Crescent. I will skip past that one. Hopefully it'll load. There we go. So that's looking along the frontage onto Pilkington Avenue. And I think we have a couple of, at least one image where it's stepped back from the site, looking a little further away, if it will load. There we go. So that's the corner with the property sitting in it.
Could you just indicate with your cursor, Mrs. Moulton, where the extension would go there? Because I think it would be helpful as compared to the other photograph you showed.
Yeah, so it will sit out to the side here, coming out approximately that far. It's a bit difficult to show. I can go back to the elevation so you can see that. Bear with me. So there we go. So you see how far the ridge extends in comparison to the ridge of the existing property. So it'll sit out here. So hopefully you've had enough information to help you form a judgment as to whether the extension is acceptable in terms of its appearance. Whether it's subordinate and it's appropriate in scale and design and is not harmful. In terms of the Highway Authority's comments, they did object, and they maintained their objection on the grounds that the proposal doesn't provide adequate off-street parking. So there is provision for 2 car parking spaces within the site, which has overcome the concerns of the landscape development section, who had concerns that the widening of the access to form a 3rd parking space would create greater hard surfacing and would affect the street tree. So their concerns have been addressed, but the Highway Authority have concerns that only 2 parking spaces are proposed. As has been pointed out, that if it's considered that the inadequacy of the parking is sufficient to result in a cumulative impact on the road network to the point that it's severe, then that is a grounds for refusal. But the view is that there is adequate space within the street for the parking of additional cars. They could be parked clear of the junction of Beresford Crescent and Pilkington Avenue if there is any need for additional parking over and above the 2 on-site spaces, and that there is no evidence or no basis upon which to support a refusal, because it couldn't be demonstrated that the cumulative impact on the highway network would be severe. I think that's as much as I can say at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moulton. So I invite comment from members, and I see Councillor Holland wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Tagg for his comments representing the objectors to this proposal, who are numerous. There are a lot of them. Some of them may even be watching tonight. I hear what our officer has to say, and we've taken a look already at some of the photographs of the neighbouring area. I'm inclined to support the objections under the 4 heads that Councillor Tagg raised, although of course I'm open to changing my view. I think in terms of the size and the mass, again, this is a property which I think, or the proposal is far in excess of what I would like to see. It is not a modest extension. It is certainly at the upper end of what is acceptable, and I would argue beyond what is acceptable. If you look at the other examples that have been raised, those are properties where the extension is either stepped down further or set back further. This is an application which would see a modest setback, I think 300 millimetres, but not set back far enough for it to fall behind the development line of Beresford Crescent. And that line is very clear on the plans. It is the line that the garage that's now there holds. In terms of the highways objection, this application is, as our officers just confirmed, a unicorn, because highways actually bothered to object to it, and they've maintained that objection right up to the point of the committee report. And that is a very rare thing indeed. It is, I mean, I've always said that the Highways Authority is supine when it comes to planning applications. So if even the Highways Authority objects, I think it is worth investigating their objection and interrogating it very closely. Now, I'm not sure why our landscape department has issued a second supplementary. Perhaps our officer can help us out here. There is a first supplementary report and there is a second supplementary, which rather confusingly is also headlined first supplementary report. But it is the second one that I'm referring to. And the second one says that our landscape officer, it doesn't change the recommendation, but it says, sorry, no. I've confused myself. I am in fact talking about the first supplementary. The first supplementary says that since the agenda was published, further comments have been received from the landscape development section. Something about 3 parking spaces. However, they confirmed that if only 2 parking spaces are required, this would fall out of the tree root protection areas. Now, I don't think, having read what the Highways Authority says, that there are only 2 spaces required. The Highways Authority is very clear. This development, this proposal, requires an off-street parking provision of 3 spaces. The Highways Department is also clear that what is currently a garage cannot count as one of those spaces because it's not 3 metres by 6 metres as its internal dimensions. And in addition to that, the applicant has marked up on the proposals that what is currently a garage will instead be used for cycle storage. So it isn't for car parking. It's not proposed for car parking. The applicant needs to demonstrate that there is space within the curtilage of this site to house 3 cars, which kind of brings me on to the concerns about houses in multiple occupation. I would not wish to infer bad faith on any applicant, but it is true to say that this property was advertised as a 7-bedroom student let prior to the validation of this application. So I'm under no illusions as to what we imagine the property will be used for. It is a family home, but it has in the past been let to students, and I have full expectation that any extension of this nature, the proposal, if we look at it, that has 2 bedrooms on the ground floor, is not truly designed to be a family home. I anticipate that it will be let out to different households in the future. Now, we accept as an authority and as a planning framework that houses in multiple occupation, large HMOs, are a different use class from standard residential dwellings. And that does have an impact on the number of cars that you can expect to be associated with the site. So taking the applicant at face value, if this is a family home, I want to see 3 parking spaces on the within the curtilage. If it is going to be used in the future as a large HMO, I would certainly want to see 3 parking spaces minimum, never mind as a maximum, because this isn't a family home. This is something where there will be a number of different people living. They will all be adults, one anticipates, and they will all be, one anticipates also, with their own cars. Although I absolutely commend the inclusion of cycle storage. I think we should all cycle. I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, you'd agree with us that more people should cycle more places. The final comment that I wish to make, so the final head that Councillor Tagg mentioned, I think, was the impact on the root protection area of this mature highways tree. The applicant who's with us tonight has also made a written representation, and she includes in that a quote, not a quote, but attributed to one of our officers, a comment that the root protection area intrudes very slightly on the proposed development footprint. And in my mind, that's completely backwards. The tree is there now. It's a mature tree. The root protection area, the clue's in the name, it's there to be protected. And yes, the proposed development would infringe by 1.7 metres into that root protection area. So that, to my mind, is another indication of why the footprint's too large. I'll stop there, Mr. Chair. I've rattled on for quite some time, but I'll listen to other members.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. We have several members who wish to speak. The first who indicated was Councillor Moffat, so I'll call her next. Councillor Moffat.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Tagg and Councillor Holland. I completely support the points that Councillor Holland has made and the concerns that have been raised there. I did go and actually have a look around the area, and just casually walking by, the number of people who stopped and made and expressed genuine concern. I am worried of the size of it, and when it was pointed out just how close to the pavement the building would come, it's really disproportionate to you know, the twin building that is next to it as well. I absolutely agree that it's the wrong way round to say that the route is impeding upon the plans when the route is there to be protected and was there first. So there are far too many concerns, I think, for me to feel comfortable in agreeing with to permit this development. The other thing, you know, people on this committee will have heard me a number of times talk about parking, and we know that the lack of buses in the area contributes to the number of households that have to have multiple private vehicles. So, you know, there are just too many issues. There are too many causes for concern, and I think the size is just over the top. And if it is just for a family, I think back to the drawing board and find something that fits into all of the other kind of family houses and helps to develop an area which is an area for families. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Northcott.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I've been listening to the debate and looked at very closely at the objections for this. Great big family house, yes, got no problems against that. But where I have got a problem is these type of houses that are family houses, but then go to be houses of multiple occupancy and service far more people than they were originally designed for. And areas it's expected to take that sort of development. I know it's the law. This can happen, but it's wrong in this area. In my view, the residents' objections are quite sound. I would be mindful to, if Councillor Holland is proposing that we refuse this, I would second that refusal on the grounds that it's far too big. And then the fact that the county council have actually made a comment, which I'm absolutely flabbergasted that they've actually bothered. And for them to make a comment of this nature means that they really must be quite keen on this particular item. So I will be guided by that. That there's a significant material reason for planning refusal. And I would like to say that my heart is not in this, approving this. It's not, it's against the contrary, the indications of what should be a good planning policy in a residential area of this kind. The car parking is going to be critical, as are the comings and goings of the people that are going to be living in there. If they're all going to be different backgrounds, they're going to have different interests and vested concerns of actually buying into the neighbourhood. So I'm mindful to refuse this, Chair, on the grounds that have been eloquently put forward by my council colleague, Mr. Mark Holland. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Northcote. Councillor Reddish. You're muted, Councillor. You're still muted, Councillor. You're okay now. You're okay now.
Didn't want to do it for me. What I was saying was that this is a site I know quite well, and in fact I probably pass it almost on a daily basis, and I share the concerns of my colleagues who've spoken before me. For me, I am really concerned about the size and the massing. I'm concerned, whilst I suppose we can only speculate whether it's going to be HMO premises, property or not. I suspect from advertisements that it is. And that raises, for me, a huge concern about parking. I think the relationship with the buildings, because it's a corner plot, it actually affects probably more houses than a house in the middle of a street. And I think the effects on several properties really, for me, is too great. As previous speakers have said, highways have actually said that they recommend 3 car parking spaces, and as Councillor Holland said, it's quite surprising that they've actually made a comment, because they don't always. So if they're saying 3 and the site says 2, yet again, that is an issue, especially if our fears are right in that it is going to be multiple occupancy. So I will not be supporting this at all. On size, on massing, on parking. Maybe that we need to look forward to another application with the property, with the extension set back a bit. I'm suggesting maybe as much as a metre setback. So I will not be supporting this proposal tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems a sad day that student accommodation in the Westlands. It was a Bonneville development between the wars, a garden village for family homes. And we don't know whether it's going to be a HMO or a family home. But it's a sad day, really, in my estimation, Mr. Chairman. They were talking between a family home that's going to be extended, such as an extent, to how many family members would be there against HMO. But my colleagues seem to be assured that it is going to be HMO. I don't think whether we can ask advice, whether we can actually surmise that it is going to be an HMO with the size of that particular extension. And the last speaker, Councillor Reddish, made the point that, yeah, it is too big for, if it was a family, going to be a family home, it'd be a smaller extension. on that corner. But we see it all over. We've seen houses demolished in this particular area for new properties to be built. So it's a change in the living, the way that people live in this day and age. So I'll be interested in any more of the debate, but I'm going to go on what Councillor Reddish has just said, that really, you know, it is over the top. And I'll be listening to the debate, but I'm minded to refuse this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'm choosing not to consider the concept of whether this will be a HMO or not, because I don't think that's the matter in front of us as part of this application. And I do feel that consideration of whether this could or could not be a HMO actually detracts away from the matters that we should be considering. Personally, I have some concerns about opinions that have been voiced about HMOs, the comment that you know, people from different backgrounds might not buy into the community. I think that's a very worrying consideration at a planning committee. I think I'd prefer not to presume that people would fit in or not. Similarly, I don't presume that this is going to be a HMO. I'm purely looking at the application that's in front of me. And I can see reasons for extending a property in order to include a substantial number of bedrooms. These days, particularly where we are with social care and caring for families, there is reason now to extend properties to include more bedrooms as elderly relatives require care. Quite often families want to provide that care for them or ensure that they're as close to them as possible if they can no longer live in their own property. So I presume not to assume that that the addition of these bedrooms is going to create a HMO regardless of what's been previously advertised or not. On those grounds, I wouldn't have an issue with this application. I do have issue with the massing of the application, the location of the application in proximity, the extension and how close it comes to the boundary. I find it very interesting that county highways are concerned about the number of parking spaces. They don't seem to be that concerned about the number of parking spaces when we have massive tower blocks of students accommodation. So it's interesting to see them suddenly become quite focused on a number of parking spaces for a house that is quite frankly 1 bedroom larger than my house, and I only have 1 parking space, two at a squeeze. So I feel that's quite interesting. Perhaps another element of predetermination on behalf of county to presume that this would need a number of parking spaces because it would naturally become a HMO. I will be voting for refusal purely on the grounds that I feel that the extension is too close to the proximity of the border and the massing. I will not be voting for refusal on any prediction of this becoming a HMO at any point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I hear what you say and I endorse many of your comments about HMOs. Mr. Fleet wishes to speak. He may wish to address this item. If not, I want to ask him a question about it.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the points being raised around parking, harm to the trees, the HMO ones, I can see some of the sort of depth within those arguments. The one, though, that I feel I need to flag up and discuss in more depth is the one around the sort of scale and mass of the extension. Side extensions on these sort of corner plots are notoriously tricky, and I've dealt with them myself over many years. The plots are quite prominent on the corner, they sit slightly forward, but they are sort of 2-3 bedroom semis, and they are a sort of fairly standard house type that exists in the borough and other places in the country. And developers have got to a point now where they've learned some of those core skills around subservience, setting back the frontage, dropping the ridge height, and this sort of 2/3 width type judgment on how far to extend these properties. And so these have become sort of standard measures, rules that have been sort of accepted through appeals in the past. And we do have a number of these sort of extensions, most notably immediately opposite at number 2, which, as Elaine Moulton showed earlier, we have that subservient setback extension immediately opposite the site. But not only that, further up at the opposite end of Bereford Crescent, we have another property, number 41, that has a side extension as well. And in November of last year, there was another approval at number 50 for another side extension, step back, with about the same step back as the one currently proposed. In fact, that one at number 50 is actually closer to the highway than this one under current consideration. This is effectively the fourth side extension on a corner plot out of all of these plots that are around. So it's an established character that's starting to emerge. I understand the frustrations and concerns, and yes, the way the plans are being presented and with all the bedrooms in it, it does technically fall below the HMO separate use class order. But in terms of a scale and mass argument, it just on its own, that's going to be a difficult one for us to sustain at appeal. If it's from a particular viewpoint coming down Pilkington Avenue, you feel that actually traffic coming down Pilkington Avenue has a greater exposure to this than other properties. If there's something that sort of says this plot is different to the other three, that have two of which built, one of which has been approved, that gives us some traction in the appeal scenario. But the grounds for parking, the 2 as opposed to 3, I can certainly see where county came from that. If it's got those rooms in it, I feel there's something stronger there in county. And the highways, the trees concern, the impact on some of the route protection area, it's not massive, but it is an impact on route protection area, and I can understand the concerns members have, particularly given the amount of trees and the character that Beresford Crescent has from all of that sort of foliage down there. But it's that particular one about scale and mass that I feel is a one that the existing plots opposite and in Beresford could put us under challenge. Thank you, Chair.
Before you finish, Mr. Fleet, could I just revisit the notion of an HMO? Am I correct in thinking that the application in front of us, the question of whether this would or would not become an HMO is not a material consideration to the determination of this application?
As it's 6 bedrooms or less in the units, then no, it's not a separate use class. It's not a new planning use as a HMO. So it still falls within the traditional residential categories.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Northcott.
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me a second time. And just to make it clear to Councillor Jones, when I said the buy-in, it's meant purely on the basis of 6 or 7 individuals as opposed to a family having that investment in the actual family house. That was where I was driving from, just to be clear, any misunderstandings of that. That being said, I do believe that we have determined applications before when there's been known of an intended use. That there's obviously some cause for concern here about the obvious end use of where this application's going. And that's where I think we also need to be very careful where we tread. Obviously, highways look like they've come to that same conclusion, and they're assessing their basis of argument on the cumulative facts of the impact from excessive cars or not having that capacity for the car parking space should have on the characteristics of that area. And that's quite significant, because if this was allowed on the basis of no challenge from us, then it would leave other houses a similar pathway to adopt a scheme like this. And then before you know it, we've got car parking problems that we've made overnight. Now we've sat on this committee before, and Councillor Jones is quite right. You know, we've sat on tower blocks and the car parking has been inadequate, and we've raised those concerns as much as we possibly can. But we're in a position now here to determine an application whether we think that the parking spaces are adequate enough for this property. Based on the information we have to its size. I'm afraid that I should be still minded to refuse on that basis that the car parking isn't sufficient, the cumulative effects would be far too great on the area in terms of negative impact on the houses next door and actual residents using the street. So I'll rest my case there. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just challenge our planning officer, a large HMO is defined as a property that is rented to 5 separate households or more, and 6 is a higher number than 5. So in my view, if this property were rented out as an HMO and every bedroom that's listed as a bedroom on the plans that have been provided for us, it would count as an HMO. That being said, I'd like to reflect on what Councillor Jones said, and I think he's completely right. We shouldn't have our judgment here coloured by who we feel may at some point occupy the property. That is not a relevant planning consideration. It is relevant from the point of view of parking, and if we were having a debate now and we were talking about permitting it, then it would become relevant, because in my view, the parking matter is critical. And we would be talking about the potential occupation of the property in terms, I think, of restrictions on permitted development rights, because if this is a straightforward family home, we're still going to want to see 3 car parking spaces. But the impact, in my view, on highways of an HMO is materially different from the impact on highways of a family home that has more bedrooms than the one that's there at the moment. On the basis that Councillor Jones feels uncomfortable, I think other members may do as well, I would like to move refusal on the other grounds that have been mentioned. So that is size and massing, that is the impact on the root protection area of the mature highways tree, and that is impact on highway and parking as outlined in the objection that we've received from Staffordshire County Council. So on those 3 heads, I would like to propose objection. If it assists our officers, my view would be that the size of it, while it may be comparable to others in the area, I've not necessarily looked at those. In my view, we're looking at an application on its own merits, and it is too large. Our officers indicated that it's at the upper end of what people typically claim you can get away with. So planning consultants and applicants have chanced their arm in the past, and we've arrived at a sort of common law situation where, by reasonable agreement of planning officers and planning authorities, you can get away with increasing the frontage of your property by 2/3 of whatever the original is if you're making a 2-storey side extension. But in fact, this 2-storey side extension would reach closer to the curtilage, to the boundary of the property, than its opposite number on the other side of the road. It would break the development line, and it would impinge on the root protection area of that mature tree. And that, in my view, is the argument that I'm advancing as to why this is too large. So it may be set back, but it's not set back as far as others. It may be at the upper end of what is considered in terms of width, but by going out that far, not only is it at the upper extent of what would generally be considered the maximum width of a side extension, it breaks the development line of the road. Mine's gone blank. Beresford Crescent breaks the development line by almost a metre. It impinges on that root protection area by more than a metre, 1.7 metres. It is just too large, and those are the terms that I would express my objection in.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really a question, really. I just hung up on. In the day, the Westlands, we were always told it was designed by the Bourneville Trust, and it was a garden village set out, and there was certain buildings, certain designs, and you weren't allowed to cross over those design terms, and it was set out as that garden village. But now we've seen loads of extensions going on. The point I'm going to ask you, does it hold any merit where it was a garden village, set out as a garden village, and now it's changing? People housing needs change. Is there any merit in that, Mr. Chairman? Could I ask the officer if there's any merit in that with the Bourneville Trust, what they set out years ago?
I have heard reference to development within the Westlands being Bourneville Trust-based development. I couldn't confirm whether the development on Beresford Crescent is part of that. But what I can confirm is that this area has not been identified as having any special character with any policies within any policies of the development plan. And so there are no policies that seek to protect the character in any more significant way than other parts of the borough. So it's an area that's considered against policy, or extensions are considered against policy H18, and there's no further character policies that we need to address when determining such an application. So that's the key policy to consider the proposal again. I think there may be restricted covenants that apply in the area, but that is not a material consideration in the determination of a planning application. So I don't think the fact that it may have been developed through the Bourneville Trust is material to the determination of the application, and it certainly hasn't been taken into consideration within the report or in the determination of any of the other applications that have been highlighted tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the explanation.
Right. Are there any other members who wish to comment? I don't see any indication. I'm whizzing up and down the participation thing, which goes off my screen. So I've got to go up and down, I'm afraid. But I can't see any raised hands there. And I can't see any people with hands up on my little screens, unless that was Councillor Owen. Did you wish to speak, Councillor?
No, I was pressing a key on my iPad.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. So I think we've had a good debate. We know where the main grounds of the debate are. Now, what I'm looking for in the first instance is whether Councillor Holland has a seconder. He outlined 3 areas on which he was going to move refusal of this application. And perhaps before I look for a seconder, he could remind me briefly of what those were, so that we're all clear.
Thank you, Chair. The reasons have been expressed both by Councillor Tagg in his opening remarks, but also officers when they are considering the fine tuning of the wording of what we're about to vote on. If my proposal is successful, I would encourage them to refer to some of the material that was submitted by objectors to the scheme, because it does refer directly to policy. I think our saved local policy is H18, but they do also refer to bits of the National Planning Policy Framework in terms of the first head of objection, which is size and mass of the proposed extension. The second is impact on parking and highways, and in that I would refer to the objection that's been made by the County Council. It's in their own terms and they are the Highways Authority, so I would refer to that. And the third reason for refusal is an impact, moderate I would say, rather than a small impact. It is an impact on the root protection area of that mature tree near to the boundary of the property, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I see we have extra hands. Councillor Northcott. Oh,
thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to support those 3 reasons put forward by Councillor Mark Holland. Thank you.
Councillor Moffat, I think has your hand up as well.
I did, Chair. I did have my hand up to second Councillor Holland.
Okay, so we've clearly got support for a proposal for refusal on the 3 grounds that have been outlined by Councillor Holland. I'll now take a vote on that by name. So if you are voting for in this vote, you are voting for refusal on the 3 grounds as proposed by Councillor Holland. Councillor Williams.
For refusal.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
For refusal, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
For, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
For, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Reddish.
For.
Councillor Northcott.
For the reasons for refusal, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
For the reasons for refusal.
Councillor Moffat.
For the 3 reasons outlined as refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
For. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
For refusal, Chair.
Thank you. I think that is unanimous refusal. Could I just ask members, can they hear me? Because I seem to have a delay on my system at the moment. It seems not to be working properly.
Loud and clear, Chair.
We can hear you.
Okay. That's good. That's good, because I was a little bit concerned the system was going wobbly over the last couple of minutes or so. In that case, that item is refused for the reasons stated. Let us progress to item 12 on our agenda. Again, application for other development, this time Oakley Hall, Market Drayton. Again, I draw your attention to 2 extra documents that should be appended to the documents you've received. And again, I'll just ask our officer if we've got anything else to hear this evening.
No, there's nothing further to add. Thank you.
I look for comment from members. Councillor Northcott. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this property very, very well. Last time I was inside the property was by the previous owners. I've seen the work that's been done over the years. Some of it sympathetic, some of it not. This application sees itself to address some of those issues in restoring the house back to its previous character, but at the same time making it more adaptable for modern family living. Anybody who's actually seen the hall, it is magnificent. It really is quite a beautifully constructed building. This has been through to Corp. Obviously, the Shropshire have also had us to say on this. It's on my patch, not very far away from where I live. I know the area very, very well, and I don't see anything here that's unsympathetic in the main to the actual integrity of the building. The parish council raised no objections to this. This has been through there and discussed many times when the application was previously withdrawn. I don't see a problem with it at all. I would like to formally propose that this is accepted as recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I do go along with what has been said. And second, Councillor Northcott. It's a beautiful spot, a public right of way that runs around the corner of this property, around the lake and up the side of the hall. It's a beautiful spot right on the Shropshire border, and we should be really proud of it. And if somebody's prepared to make this hall into a modern living for families, I support 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. I endorse what's been said by Councillors Northcott and Williams. I think the gold standard for listed building consent applications is a positive comment from the Conservation Advisory Working Party. And on the basis that they are content with this application, I'm also in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Let me just scroll up and down to make sure I don't see any more hands. I don't. Are there any members who wish to comment further? In which case, I'll take again a vote by roll call. So obviously, if you vote in favour this time, you're voting for the recommendation. Councillor Williams.
For the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
For the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
For, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
For, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Reddish.
For the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
For, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
For, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
For the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Cooper,
For, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
For, Chair.
I think that's everyone, and I think that that is passed unanimously. So we can progress to our next item. Again, an application for other development, this time Betley Court. Betley, we all know the history here. And once again, there are 2 further documents for you to be cognizant of. And I'll just ask our officer if there's any further information we require this evening.
No, there's nothing further.
Okay, in that case, I invite comment from members. I see no comments, so I'm going to proceed to a vote. Councillor Williams.
Permit, Chair, as recommended.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Permit.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
As per recommendations, permit, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Permit, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
Permit, Chair.
That I think again is passed unanimously. That brings us, I think, to our final substantive item, which is a list of potential site visit dates. These, I think, are simply carrying over previous practice from the committee. So those dates and their times are simply the equivalent ones of last year's dates. But I invite comment from members about the whether they feel they're the right times, the right days, things like that.
No problem.
Again, let me just make sure that I've got this thing right, because something has now come onto my screen which shouldn't be there. There we go. I don't see any further comments, so I'm going to take a vote on that. Councillor Williams.
No problem with the dates, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Mrs. Jill Williams.
No problem, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
For.
Councillor Holland.
And
Councillor Jones.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
In favour, accept the dates.
Councillor Northcott.
As read, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
As read, Chair.
Councillor Moffat.
Accept the dates, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Yes, accept, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
Accept, Chair.
Again, I think that's unanimous. Let's hope there are no important footballing dates on the Saturdays there. That brings us to the last item on our agenda this evening, which is any urgent business as defined by the relevant paragraph of the relevant Act. I have not been sent any notice of any urgent business. I look to our officers for confirmation that there isn't any. There's silence from our officers. I'm hoping that means there isn't any. That in turn means we can bring our meeting this evening to a close. It's been rather a long meeting, but I hope that reflects the care and attention we've given to the issues on there. And I will wish you a very pleasant rest of the evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good night, Chair.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.